Those words, they echo in my mind every single night. The venom in her voice, the way she spat them out like I was some disease she needed to scrub away. That's what my son's new wife screamed at me, in front of 300 guests at their wedding reception. 300 people who watched a mother get torn apart by the woman her son chose to love. She raised her champagne glass high, that crystal flute catching the light from those ridiculous chandeliers, and she smirked. God, that smirk will haunt me forever. Pure malice dressed up in designer silk and pearls. I'll call the police, she announced, her voice carrying across that marble-floored ballroom like she was making some grand proclamation. Kindly leave now. Kindly. As if there was anything kind about humiliating a 62-year-old woman who had traveled 2 hours just to witness her only child's wedding day. My hands. I can still feel how they trembled as I clutched that small gift I'd brought. Such a simple thing. A delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant. The same necklace Daniel had saved up his allowance money to buy me for Mother's Day when he was 12 years old. I'd kept it safe in my jewelry box for 27 years, never wearing it, preserving it like the precious memory it was. I thought, God, I was so naive. I thought she might want to have it. Something to connect her to our family's history. Something that meant love. But there I stood, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, holding this symbol of a mother's love while she treated me like garbage that had wandered in from the street. The guests, their whispers cut deeper than her screams. I heard them, every poisonous word. Who is that old woman? Why is she bothering the bride? Someone should escort her out. They were enjoying this. These people in their $1,000 suits and designer gowns were getting entertainment from watching a mother's heart get shattered in real time. And my son. My Daniel, the boy I raised with these 2 hands, the man I sacrificed everything for. He looked away. He couldn't even meet my eyes as his wife destroyed me in public. 27 years of birthday parties I organized alone, school plays I attended alone, graduation ceremonies where I cheered loud enough for 2 parents, and he looked away. I turned to leave. What else could I do? I nodded politely, like the lady my mother raised me to be, even as my world crumbled around me. I was ready to walk out of that hall, out of his life, and disappear forever. Let them have their perfect wedding without the embarrassment of his plain, ordinary mother. But then everything changed. Wait. A woman's voice cut through the hall like a knife through silk. Sharp, urgent, panicked. I stopped, one foot already pointed toward that exit that promised escape from this nightmare. The bride's mother had risen from her seat at the head table. This elegant woman with her perfectly styled gray hair and her pearl necklace, she was staring at me with eyes wide as saucers, her face draining of color like someone had pulled a plug. Wait, she said again, her voice shaking now. What did you say your name was? I answered softly, barely above a whisper because my throat felt raw from holding back tears. Evelyn Rowe. The change in her face. I'll never forget it. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering a gasp that seemed to come from her very soul. The proud, regal woman who had been smiling smugly just moments before now looked like she'd seen a ghost. Oh my God, she whispered, and the microphone at the head table picked up every word, broadcasting her shock to the entire hall. You're the woman who owns the company my husband works for. The silence that followed was deafening. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. Every camera phone lowered. The only sound was the soft jazz music that continued playing because even the band didn't understand what had just happened. But I understood. Finally, after 62 years of being underestimated, overlooked, and pushed aside, someone recognized who I really was. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you about the woman they decided to humiliate without knowing who they were dealing with. My name is Evelyn Rose Rowe, and I am the sole owner and CEO of Eterna Group, a company that started as a small candle-making business in my kitchen and grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that employs over 800 people across 3 states. But more importantly, more painfully, I am the mother who raised Daniel Marcus Rowe completely alone after my husband died when Daniel was only 5 years old. James, my husband, my soulmate, my best friend, he died of a sudden heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. One minute he was kissing me goodbye as he left for work, telling me he loved me and reminding me about Daniel's soccer practice after school. The next minute I was getting a phone call from the hospital, racing through traffic with my 5-year-old son crying in the back seat because mommy was crying and he didn't understand why. They couldn't save him. The doctors tried for 3 hours, but James was gone, and I was left alone with a little boy who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. 27 years. That's how long I've been both mother and father to Daniel. 27 years of working double shifts as a high school English teacher during the day and making candles in my kitchen at night, selling them at craft fairs and farmers markets just to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. Do you know what it's like to fall asleep at your kitchen table at 2 in the morning because you're so exhausted from dipping wicks and pouring wax that you can't make it to your bedroom? Do you know what it's like to wear the same 3 outfits to work every week because every spare penny goes toward your child's needs? I remember the night Daniel came home from school crying because the other kids were making fun of his shoes. They were falling apart, the soles separating from the leather, but they were all we could afford. I stayed up all night gluing them back together and coloring over the scuff marks with a black marker, praying they'd hold together for another few weeks until my next paycheck came in. I worked 16-hour days. I tutored struggling students after school for $15 an hour, money that went straight into Daniel's college fund. I sold my homemade candles at every craft fair within a 50-mile radius, standing behind a card table in all kinds of weather, smiling at customers even when my feet were aching and my back was screaming. When Daniel was in high school and wanted to play football, the equipment cost $300. $300 might as well have been $3,000 for a single mother working a teacher's salary. So I picked up extra tutoring sessions, sold candles at 3 additional markets, and even cleaned houses on weekends. My hands were raw from chemicals, my knees ached from scrubbing floors, but my son got his football equipment. And when he scored his first touchdown, when he ran toward the stands with that huge smile on his face, looking for me in the crowd, that moment made every sacrifice worth it. Every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every missed meal so he could have seconds, it was all worth it to see my boy succeed. But success has a way of changing people. As my little candle business grew and Daniel went off to college, something shifted. The more money I made, the more distant he became. The more successful I became, the less he seemed to need me. After college, when I offered to invest in his first business venture, a tech startup that I didn't really understand but believed in because he believed in it, he accepted my money but not my advice. $50,000 from my company's profits went into his dream, and when it succeeded, when it grew into something bigger than either of us had imagined, he seemed to forget where that seed money came from. The calls became shorter. The visits became rarer. When I'd invite him for Sunday dinner, he'd say he was too busy. When I'd suggest we take a vacation together, something we'd always talked about doing when we finally had the money, he'd say he had meetings, obligations, responsibilities. I understood. I really did. He was building his own life, his own success, and I was proud of him. But understanding doesn't make the loneliness hurt any less. Understanding doesn't fill the empty chair at your dinner table or make your phone ring when you're hoping to hear your child's voice. When he started dating Melissa, I was excited. Finally, I thought, he's found someone to share his life with. Maybe now he'll understand the importance of family, of staying connected, of remembering that love matters more than business. I was so wrong. The first time I met Melissa was at a restaurant Daniel had chosen, some upscale place with tiny portions and enormous prices. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Polished in a way I never was, never could be. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup professionally applied, her clothes clearly expensive. She spoke about art galleries and wine tastings, charity galas, and social events that might as well have been on another planet for all I knew about them. But when I tried to connect with her, when I asked about her family or her interests or shared a funny story about Daniel as a child, she would smile politely and change the subject. When I mentioned that I owned a business, she assumed I meant a small shop or maybe a little online store. When Daniel started to explain that my company was actually quite successful, she cut him off, saying they should order dessert. I should have seen the warning signs then. The way she dismissed my stories, the way she redirected conversations away from our family history, the way she seemed embarrassed when I mentioned Daniel's childhood or our modest beginnings. But I wanted so desperately for my son to be happy. I wanted so badly to have a daughter-in-law, someone to shop with and cook for and share family traditions with. I ignored the red flags because hope is sometimes stronger than wisdom. When they got engaged, Daniel called to tell me the news. Not visited, called. A 5-minute phone conversation to announce that he was marrying the woman he loved and that they were planning a spring wedding. That's wonderful, honey, I told him, my voice bright with genuine happiness. I'm so excited to help plan everything. When do you want to go look at venues? I have so many ideas for flowers, and I know a wonderful caterer who. Mom, he interrupted, and there was something in his tone that made my stomach clench. Melissa's family is handling all the planning. They have experience with these kinds of events. These kinds of events. As if I was too simple, too common to understand how to plan a proper wedding. Of course, I said, swallowing my hurt. But I'd love to help in whatever way I can. Maybe I could host an engagement party? Or help with the bridal shower. We'll let you know, he said, but his voice suggested that they wouldn't. And they didn't. For months, I heard nothing about wedding plans. When I'd ask Daniel about dates or details, he'd give me vague answers. Soon, he'd say, we're still working out the details. When I'd offer to help with costs, because I could afford to, because I wanted to contribute to my only child's wedding, he'd tell me it was handled. I started to feel like a stranger in my own son's life. This boy I had raised, this man I had sacrificed everything for, was getting married and I was being systematically excluded from every part of the process. The invitation. God, that invitation still makes my chest tight with pain. It didn't come from Daniel. It didn't even come from Melissa or her family. It came from my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, whose daughter works at the country club where the reception was being held. Evelyn, she said when she knocked on my door 3 days before the wedding, I hope you don't mind, but Sarah mentioned that she saw your son's wedding on the event schedule. She thought you might want to know the details since you hadn't mentioned it. 3 days. I found out about my son's wedding location 3 days before it happened, and not from him. From a neighbor whose daughter worked at the venue. I called Daniel immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. Oh, he said when I asked about the venue. Yeah, the Grandview Country Club. Saturday at 6. Saturday at 6, I repeated. This Saturday. In 3 days. Yeah, Daniel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need to know what you'd like me to wear. Should I coordinate with the wedding party colors? Do you have any preferences? There was a long pause. Too long. And when he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than any blade. Mom, please, just behave professionally at the wedding. Professionally. As if I was a business associate he was obligated to invite, not the woman who had given him life and raised him and loved him unconditionally for 27 years. What do you mean? I whispered. I mean, Melissa's family is they're different from us. They move in certain circles, they have certain expectations. Please don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass him. The woman who had worked 3 jobs to pay for his college, who had built a successful business from nothing, who had raised him to be the man he was. I might embarrass him. I hung up the phone and cried for 3 hours straight. But I decided to go anyway. Because he was my son, my only child, and despite everything, I loved him. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple navy blue dress that was elegant without being flashy, paired with my late husband's mother's pearl earrings and the gold brooch James had given me for our last anniversary before he died. For the gift, I chose something deeply personal. I found an old photo of Daniel from when he was 8 years old, the day he had won his first academic award. In the picture, he's holding his certificate with one hand and holding my hand with the other, both of us grinning at the camera. I had it professionally framed with a small engraving, "To Daniel and Melissa, may your marriage be built on the same love and support that built the man you've become. With all my love, Mom." I thought it was perfect. A reminder of our history, a blessing for their future. I was so naive. The Grandview Country Club was everything I'd expected and more. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff in white gloves carrying silver trays. The kind of place where you're afraid to touch anything because it probably costs more than your monthly mortgage payment. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my simple dress and carrying my heartfelt gift, ready to watch my son marry the woman he loved. Ready to be proud, to be happy, to be the mother of the groom. The look started immediately. As I walked through the entrance, I could feel eyes on me. Not admiring eyes, judging eyes. The women in their designer gowns and statement jewelry looked me up and down like I was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Who was this ordinary-looking woman in her simple dress? Why was she here among the elite? I heard the whispers as I made my way through the cocktail area. Is that his mother? She looks so plain. I thought he came for money now. The comments floated around me like poison in the air, each one landing like a small slap. But I held my head high. I smiled politely when people looked my way. I was here for Daniel, not for their approval. The reception hall was breathtaking. Round tables with white linens and towering centerpieces, a dance floor that gleamed under the light of 3 massive chandeliers, a head table positioned like a throne for the wedding party. It was beautiful, I had to admit. Everything a bride could dream of. I spotted Daniel across the room, handsome in his black tuxedo, talking and laughing with a group of men I didn't recognize. I started walking toward him, my heart fluttering with excitement and nerves. This was it, my chance to congratulate my son, to meet his new wife as a married woman, to be part of this moment. But as I got closer, Daniel saw me coming. Our eyes met across the room, and instead of the smile I was hoping for, instead of the welcoming gesture I was praying for, he looked panicked, embarrassed. He quickly turned back to his conversation, positioning himself so his back was to me. My son turned his back on me at his own wedding. I stopped walking, standing frozen in the middle of that elegant room while well-dressed strangers moved around me like I was an obstacle they had to navigate. My chest felt tight, my eyes began to burn, but I forced myself to keep standing. Keep breathing. Keep hoping that maybe I had misunderstood. That's when she appeared. Melissa looked stunning in her wedding dress, a flowing creation of silk and lace that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, her smile radiant as she moved through the room accepting congratulations and well wishes. Until she saw me. The smile disappeared instantly, replaced by a look of irritation that she didn't even try to hide. She changed direction, walking straight toward me with purpose in her step and fire in her eyes. What do you want here? You parasite. The words exploded out of her like she'd been holding them back all evening. Every conversation in our immediate area stopped. Heads turned. Phones came out. The mother of the groom was about to be destroyed in public, and everyone wanted to watch. A parasite. She called me a parasite. A woman who had built a business from nothing, who had raised a successful man, who had come here with nothing but love and good intentions. I was a parasite. I started to speak, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I came to congratulate you both. To give you my blessing. Your blessing. She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. We don't need blessings from people like you. People like me. What did that mean? Poor people? Ordinary people? People who hadn't been born into money and privilege? I tried again, holding out the wrapped gift with trembling hands. I brought you something. It's just a small. Keep it, she snapped, not even looking at what I was offering. Whatever it is, we don't want it. The circle of onlookers had grown larger. I could feel them pressing closer, their phones recording every moment of my humiliation. Some were smirking, enjoying the show. Others looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Not one person in that room full of supposedly civilized people thought to step in and stop what was happening. I just wanted to be here for Daniel's special day, I said, hating how small and pathetic my voice sounded. I'm his mother. You're his embarrassment, she shot back, and the cruelty in her voice took my breath away. Look around you. Does this look like the kind of place where you belong? Do these look like your kind of people? She gestured to the elegant crowd, the expensive decor, the obvious wealth displayed in every corner of the room. And she was right. I didn't belong here. I was a fish out of water, a working-class woman who had stumbled into a world of privilege and status where I would never fit in. But I was still his mother. Daniel is my son, I said, trying to summon some dignity from somewhere deep inside. I raised him. I love him. I have every right to be here. Rights? She raised her champagne glass high, the crystal catching the light as she prepared to deliver the final blow. Let me tell you about rights. You have the right to leave. Now, before I call security and have you escorted out like the trespasser you are. The crowd murmured approval. Someone actually clapped. These people, these wealthy, educated, supposedly refined people, were applauding my humiliation. I looked around desperately for Daniel, hoping he would finally step in, finally defend his mother, finally show some loyalty to the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. I found him across the room, still surrounded by his friends, still with his back turned to the scene his wife was creating. He knew what was happening. The entire room could hear her voice, could see the crowd gathering around us. He knew his wife was destroying his mother in public, and he was choosing to ignore it. That moment, that realization, it broke something inside me that I don't think will ever heal completely. The little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to make me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings and misspelled words, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world, that boy was gone. In his place was a man who cared more about his image than his mother's heart. Fine, I whispered, clutching my gift tighter. I'll go. I turned to leave, ready to walk out of that hall with whatever dignity I had left. Ready to go home to my empty house and my lonely life and pretend that my heart wasn't shattering into a million pieces. But as I took that first step toward the door, my hands were shaking so badly that I lost my grip on the wrapped gift. It slipped from my fingers and hit the marble floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the entire room. The frame shattered. Glass scattered across the pristine white marble. And there, among the broken pieces, was the photograph of 8-year-old Daniel holding my hand, both of us smiling at the camera with pure, innocent love. The image was cracked down the middle now, splitting our joined hands apart. Someone in the crowd snickered. Someone else made a comment about clumsy people. The bride looked down at the broken frame with disgust, like I had deliberately damaged her perfect reception. I knelt down to gather the pieces, my cheeks burning with shame as people stepped around me like I was a janitor cleaning up a mess. My hands were bleeding from the glass, small drops of red staining the white marble, but I didn't care. I just wanted to collect what was left of that precious photo and get out of there. Leave it, Melissa commanded from above me. "The staff will clean it up." Even the broken pieces of my gift weren't worth my time, apparently. I stood up slowly, my knees aching, my hands stinging, my heart completely shattered. I looked one more time toward Daniel, hoping for eye contact, hoping for some small sign that he remembered who I was and what I meant to him. Nothing. He was laughing at something one of his friends had said, completely oblivious to his mother's pain. I turned toward the exit, ready to disappear forever from my son's life. Ready to accept that I had lost him to a world where I would never belong, to a woman who saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment to be hidden away. But then, wait. The voice was sharp, urgent, filled with something that sounded like panic. I stopped, one foot already pointed toward the door that promised escape from this nightmare. I turned around to see the bride's mother rising from her seat at the head table. This elegant woman who had been smiling proudly all evening, who had been basking in the glory of her daughter's perfect wedding, now looked like she had seen a ghost. "Wait," she said again, her voice carrying across the room despite its trembling quality. "What did you say your name was?" The question confused me. Why did it matter? What difference could my name possibly make to these people who had already decided I was nobody worth knowing? "Evelyn Rowe," I answered softly, barely above a whisper because my throat felt raw from holding back tears. The change in her face was instantaneous and dramatic. All the color drained away, leaving her looking pale and shocked. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering a gasp that seemed to come from her very soul. The proud, regal woman who had been presiding over her daughter's triumph just moments before now looked terrified. "Oh my God," she whispered, and somehow the microphone at the head table picked up her words, broadcasting them to the entire room. You're the woman who owns the company my husband works for." The silence that followed was deafening. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every laugh died on every lip. Every phone that had been recording my humiliation was suddenly lowered as people tried to process what they had just heard. Eterna Group. My company. The business I had built from nothing, starting with candles made in my kitchen and growing it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that employed hundreds of people across 3 states. The company that had contracts with some of the biggest retailers in the country. The company that, apparently, employed the father of the bride who had just spent the last 10 minutes calling me a parasite. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Almost. I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at the bride's mother, seeing recognition and terror warring in her eyes. Her husband worked for me. Her family's livelihood depended on the company I owned, the business I had built with my own 2 hands while raising my son alone. The woman they had humiliated, the parasite they had tried to drive away, was actually their boss. "Yes," I said, my voice calm and clear now, carrying across the silent room. "I am. And I came here tonight as a mother, not as an employer. But perhaps now you'll understand that appearances can be deceiving." The bride's father, a man I vaguely recognized from company events though I had never spoken to him directly, suddenly appeared beside his wife. His face had gone white as he realized what his daughter had just done, how his family had just treated the woman who signed his paychecks. "Mrs. Rowe," he stammered, rushing toward me with his hand extended. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. My daughter didn't realize." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Melissa, watching her face transform as she began to understand the magnitude of her mistake. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "You're," she started to say, but the words seemed to stick in her throat. "I'm the parasite," I finished for her, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "The woman you just humiliated in front of 300 people. The mother you told didn't belong here. The person you threatened to have arrested." The crowd pressed closer now, but for different reasons. They weren't recording my humiliation anymore. They were witnessing my vindication. They were watching a room full of people realize they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. I looked past Melissa to where Daniel was standing. Finally, he was looking at me. His face was a mask of shock and confusion and something that might have been shame. His friends had melted away, leaving him standing alone in his expensive tuxedo, staring at his mother with wide eyes. "Daniel," I said, my voice carrying across the room because everyone was listening now. Everyone was hanging on every word. "You told me to behave professionally at your wedding. You were worried I might embarrass you." I paused, letting the words sink in, letting him see the room full of people who had just witnessed his wife destroy his mother in public while he stood by and did nothing. "Tell me, son," I continued, "who exactly has been embarrassed here tonight?" The silence stretched on for what felt like eternity. Daniel opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. What could he say? How could he explain choosing his image over his mother? How could he justify staying silent while his wife called the woman who raised him a parasite? "Mrs. Rowe," the bride's father tried again, his voice desperate now. "Please, let me apologize for my family. We had no idea who you were. If you had known I was wealthy, you would have treated me better?" I asked, cutting him off. "If you had known I owned a successful business, you would have shown me respect? What does that say about your character? What does that say about your values?" He had no answer. None of them did. I turned to address the room, all these well-dressed people who had enjoyed the spectacle of my humiliation just minutes before. "I came here tonight with one simple goal," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of that elegant hall. "I wanted to witness my son's wedding. I wanted to meet his new wife and welcome her to our family. I brought a gift, a photo of Daniel as a child, happy and proud, holding his mother's hand." I gestured to the broken frame and scattered glass, still lying on the marble floor. "That gift is destroyed now, just like the relationship I thought I could have with my new daughter-in-law. But I learned something valuable tonight. I learned that some people judge worth by appearance rather than character. I learned that some people believe money equals value and poverty equals worthlessness. And I learned that my son—" I looked directly at Daniel, putting all my pain and disappointment into my gaze. "I learned that my son has forgotten the most important lesson I tried to teach him, that how you treat people when you think they can't help you reveals who you really are." The bride's mother was crying now, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she realized her daughter had potentially destroyed her husband's career. The bride herself looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. All her earlier confidence evaporated in the face of this stunning reversal. But I wasn't done. 27 years of sacrifice, of being overlooked and underestimated, of being treated like I didn't matter, it all came pouring out in words that I had held back for far too long. "You want to know who I am?" I asked the room. "I'm the woman who lost her husband at 28 and raised her son alone. I'm the teacher who worked double shifts and tutored students for $15 an hour to pay for her child's education. I'm the entrepreneur who built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch while making sure her son never went without anything he needed." My voice grew stronger with each word, fed by anger and pain and a lifetime of being dismissed. I'm the mother who put $50,000 of her own money into her son's first business venture when no bank would give him a loan. I'm the woman who worked 16-hour days so her child could play sports and go to college and chase his dreams. I'm the person who taught him that success means nothing if you forget where you came from and who helped you get there. I looked at Daniel again, seeing tears in his eyes now, seeing the weight of realization settling on his shoulders. But apparently, I continued, I'm also the woman who raised a son who would stand by and watch his wife humiliate his mother rather than risk his own embarrassment. I'm the mother who sacrificed everything for a child who grew up to be ashamed of her. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Daniel took a step toward me, his mouth opening as if to speak, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't apologize now because you have to, because people are watching, because you've realized there might be consequences. Don't insult me with words you don't mean. I turned to the bride's father, who was still standing there looking desperate and afraid. "Mr. Patterson," I said, remembering his name now from company records. "You'll receive a call from my HR department on Monday. We need to discuss whether someone who raises children with such values is the right fit for our company culture." His face went even whiter. "Good. Let him sweat. Let him wonder if his daughter's cruelty was going to cost him his job." But then I surprised him. I surprised everyone. "However," I continued, "I believe in separating personal and professional matters. Your employment will be judged on your work performance, not your family's behavior. I may be many things, but I'm not vindictive." Relief flooded his features, but I wasn't done with him yet. "That said," I added, "I think you should consider having a serious conversation with your daughter about treating all people with respect, regardless of their perceived social status. Character isn't measured by wealth, and kindness shouldn't be conditional on what someone can do for you." I looked around the room one final time, taking in all the faces that had shown me such contempt just minutes before. Now they looked ashamed, uncomfortable, uncertain. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and they didn't know how to process it. "I want you all to remember something," I said, addressing the entire reception. "Today, you witnessed a mother being humiliated by her son's wife while her son stood by and did nothing. You laughed. You recorded it. You enjoyed the spectacle of someone else's pain." The silence was complete now. Even the band had stopped playing. "But then you discovered that the woman you were mocking had power, had money, had status in your world. Suddenly your attitudes changed. Suddenly you wanted to apologize, to make amends, to fix what had been broken." I paused, letting the shame of that truth settle over them. Ask yourselves this. If I had been exactly who you thought I was, a poor, ordinary woman with no power or influence, would my pain have mattered less? Would the cruelty shown to me have been acceptable? Does someone's worth as a human being really depend on their bank account? No one answered. No one could answer. I walked over to where the broken picture frame lay scattered on the marble floor. Carefully, ignoring the glass that cut my fingers, I picked up the photograph of 8-year-old Daniel holding my hand. The image was cracked, but the love in our faces was still visible. "This is who we used to be," I said, holding up the damaged photo so everyone could see. A mother and son who loved each other unconditionally. Before money changed him. Before status became more important than family. Before he learned to be ashamed of the woman who gave him everything. I tucked the photo into my purse and stood up, blood from the glass cuts staining my simple navy dress. "I'm leaving now," I announced. Not because I was asked to, not because I don't belong here, but because I choose to. I choose to remove myself from a situation where love is conditional and respect is earned through net worth rather than character. I started walking toward the exit, my head held high, my steps steady despite the trembling in my legs. Behind me, I heard movement, voices, confusion. Someone was following me. "Mom, wait." It was Daniel's voice, desperate and pleading. I stopped but didn't turn around. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize." "What didn't you realize?" I asked without turning around. "That your wife was cruel? That she was humiliating me? That she called me a parasite in front of 300 people? Or did you not realize that I might actually be worth defending?" I was confused. Everything happened so fast. I didn't know what to do. Now I did turn around, and the look on his face almost broke my resolve. He looked like the little boy who used to come to me when he'd made a mistake, eyes wide and sorry, hoping for forgiveness. But he wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a 27-year-old man who had just chosen his social standing over his mother's dignity. "You didn't know what to do?" I repeated. When someone attacks your mother, when someone calls her names and tries to throw her out like garbage, you didn't know what to do? Tears were streaming down his face now, ruining his perfect wedding day appearance. "You knew exactly what to do, Daniel," I continued, my voice heavy with disappointment. "You knew you should defend me. You knew you should stand up for the woman who raised you. You knew you should tell your wife that she was wrong, that I deserved respect, that I was welcome at your wedding because I'm your family. You're right, he whispered. I should have. I'm so sorry, Mom. I love you. You know I love you. Do I? I asked, and the question seemed to surprise him. Because love isn't just a feeling, Daniel. Love is action. Love is choice. Love is standing up for someone even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might cost you something. I looked at him standing there in his expensive tuxedo, this successful man I had raised to be better than this. You chose to protect your image instead of your mother, I said simply. You chose your wife's approval over your family's dignity. You chose to be a coward when you should have been a son. The words hit him like physical blows. He actually staggered backward, his face crumpling with pain and shame. How do I fix this? He asked desperately. Tell me how to fix this, Mom. Please. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I had loved more than my own life, this person I had sacrificed everything for. Part of me wanted to forgive him immediately, to pull him into my arms and pretend none of this had happened. But the bigger part of me, the part that had been wounded too deeply tonight, knew that some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. I don't know if you can fix this, I said honestly. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Respect, once lost, is even harder to regain. I looked past him to where Melissa stood with her parents, all of them watching our conversation with worry and fear in their eyes. Your wife showed me tonight who she really is, I continued. When she thought I was nobody important, she treated me like dirt. When she discovered I had power, she became afraid. That tells me everything I need to know about her character. Daniel followed my gaze to his wife, and for the first time all evening, I saw doubt in his eyes as he looked at her. But more importantly, I said, drawing his attention back to me, you showed me who you've become. And I don't recognize the man standing in front of me. The son I raised would never have allowed this to happen. I can change, he said quickly. I can be better. I can. Can you? I interrupted. Can you really? Because changing means admitting that you are wrong. It means acknowledging that you've hurt the person who loves you most in this world. It means being willing to disappoint your wife and her family to defend your mother. I paused, studying his face carefully. Are you prepared to do that, Daniel? Are you prepared to tell your wife that her behavior tonight was unacceptable? Are you prepared to demand that she apologize to me publicly in front of all these people who witnessed my humiliation? Are you prepared to make this right, even if it ruins your perfect wedding reception? He looked back at Melissa again, and I saw the conflict warring in his expression. The boy I raised battling with the man he had become. The son who loved his mother fighting with the husband who wanted to keep peace with his wife. The pause told me everything I needed to know. I see, I said softly. You're still choosing her over me. Even now, even after everything, you're more concerned about disappointing her than defending me. It's not that simple, he protested. This is our wedding day. These are her friends, her family. I can't just... You can't just what? I asked. You can't just do the right thing? You can't just stand up for what's right? You can't just be the man I thought I raised you to be. The disappointment in my voice was crushing, and I could see it affecting him. But not enough. Not enough to make him choose differently. I need time, he said finally. I need to think about all this. It's been such a shock, and everything happened so fast. Time. He needed time to figure out whether defending his mother was worth upsetting his wife. Of course, I said, and my voice was calm now, resigned. Take all the time you need. Think about it carefully. Weigh the pros and cons, consider all the angles. I turned to leave again, but then stopped and looked back at him one more time. But while you're thinking, Daniel, remember this. I didn't need time to love you. I didn't need time to sacrifice for you. I didn't need time to choose you over everything else in my life, every single day for 27 years. I left him standing there in that elegant ballroom, surrounded by luxury and status and all the things he thought were important, while his mother walked out of his life. The next few days passed in a blur of pain and anger and devastating loneliness. I went through the motions of my daily routine, checking emails, reviewing reports, meeting with my management team, but my heart wasn't in any of it. How could it be? The most important thing in my life, my relationship with my son, had been shattered beyond recognition. I kept replaying the wedding reception in my mind, seeing Melissa's cruel smirk, hearing her vicious words, watching my son turn away when I needed him most. But the image that haunted me most was that broken photograph lying on the marble floor, 8-year-old Daniel holding my hand, both of us smiling with pure love, now cracked down the middle. The media attention was unavoidable. Someone at the wedding had recorded parts of the confrontation, and within days it was all over social media. Wealthy CEO humiliated at son's wedding was trending on multiple platforms. The story had everything people loved: drama, class conflict, family betrayal, and a stunning reversal of fortune. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, but I ignored them all. This wasn't entertainment to me. This was my broken heart being dissected for public consumption. But then, 3 days after the wedding, something happened that I wasn't expecting. Daniel came to my house. He didn't call first. He didn't ask permission. He just showed up at my front door on Tuesday evening, still wearing his work clothes, his eyes red and swollen like he'd been crying. I opened the door and saw him standing there, and for a moment I was transported back 20 years to all the times he'd come home from school upset about something, looking to his mother for comfort and guidance. But this wasn't 20 years ago, and I wasn't sure I had any comfort left to give. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter, watching as he looked around the living room that had once been his second home. Everything was the same as it had always been: the family photos on the mantel, the comfortable furniture we'd picked out together when he was in high school, the books and candles and small mementos of a life lived simply but fully. His eyes stopped on one photo in particular, the same image that had been in the broken frame at his wedding, but this one was the original, safely displayed where it had been for nearly 20 years. "I remember that day," he said, walking over to study the picture more closely. "I had won the spelling bee at school. You were so proud of me." "I was always proud of you," I said quietly. "Even when you disappointed me, I was still proud of you." He turned to face me, and I could see the weight of the past few days in his expression. The confident, successful businessman was gone, replaced by a man who looked lost and broken. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said at the wedding. About who I've become. About the choices I made that night." I didn't respond. I just waited for him to continue. "You were right," he said, the words seeming to cost him great effort. "About everything. I was a coward. I chose my image over your dignity. I let my wife humiliate the most important person in my life because I was more worried about making a scene than defending my mother." The admission hung in the air between us. It was what I had wanted to hear, but somehow it didn't make me feel any better. "I left Melissa," he continued, "and this did surprise me. Yesterday morning, I told her that what she did to you was unforgivable and that I couldn't be married to someone who would treat my mother that way." I stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. "You left your wife? Daniel, you've been married for 3 days. I married someone I didn't really know," he said bitterly. "Or maybe I did know, and I just chose to ignore it because she was beautiful and successful and came from the right kind of family." He sat down heavily on the couch, putting his head in his hands. "Do you know what she said when I confronted her about that night?" he asked. "She said she was protecting our social standing. She said that having people like you at our events would hurt our reputation. She actually used the phrase 'people like you' when talking about my mother." The pain in his voice was real, and despite everything, my heart ached for him. This was my son, my baby, and he was hurting. "She said she was sorry that I found out you were wealthy," he continued, "because it complicated things. She wasn't sorry for what she did to you. She was sorry that it had consequences for her." I sat down across from him, studying his face carefully. And what did you say to that? I told her that you weren't wealthy when you raised me. I told her that you built your success through hard work and sacrifice, most of it for my benefit. I told her that your worth as a person had nothing to do with your bank account, and that the woman she called a parasite was the strongest, most generous person I had ever known. Tears were starting to form in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wasn't ready to forgive yet, even if he was saying the things I had longed to hear. I told her, he continued, his voice growing stronger, that I was ashamed of myself for not defending you, and that I would understand if you never spoke to me again. But I told her that I would spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your respect, even if I never succeeded. He looked up at me then, his eyes bright with unshed tears. She laughed, Mom. When I said I was ashamed of myself for not defending you, she laughed. She said I was being dramatic, that it wasn't that big a deal, that you would get over it because mothers always do. The callousness of that statement took my breath away. The casual assumption that a mother's love was so bottomless that any amount of cruelty could be forgiven and forgotten. That's when I knew, Daniel said. That's when I realized I had married someone who didn't understand love at all. Real love. The kind you showed me every day for 27 years. He slid off the couch and onto his knees in front of me, a grown man kneeling before his mother like a child seeking absolution. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, and the words seemed to come from the very depths of his soul. I'm so sorry. I failed you in the worst possible way at the moment when you needed me most. I let you down. I let myself down. I let down the memory of Dad and everything you taught me about being a good man. The tears came then, flowing freely down his face as he knelt there in my living room, broken and repentant. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued through his sobs. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I remember now. I remember who you are and what you've done for me. I remember the mother who worked 3 jobs to pay for my education. I remember the woman who put $50,000 into my business when I had nothing. I remember the person who sacrificed everything so I could have the life I wanted. I reached out and touched his face, wiping away his tears with my thumb the way I had when he was small and something had hurt him. I remember too, I said softly. I remember the little boy who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, even though he could barely reach the stove. I remember the teenager who worked part-time jobs to help with household expenses even though I told him his job was to focus on school. I remember the young man who used to call me every Sunday just to check in and tell me about his week. I paused, looking down at this broken man who was still my son, still my child, no matter how much he had hurt me. But I also remember the man who gradually stopped calling, who became too busy for family dinners, who acted like his success had nothing to do with my sacrifices, I continued. I remember the son who asked me to behave professionally at his wedding because he was ashamed of where he came from. Daniel's shoulders shook with the force of his crying. I know I lost myself somewhere along the way. I got caught up in money and status and trying to fit into a world where I thought I needed to hide my past to be accepted. Money didn't change you, Daniel, I said firmly. Success didn't change you. You chose to change. You chose to value other people's opinions more than your family's love. You chose to be embarrassed by the woman who raised you. He looked up at me, his face red and swollen with tears. How do I fix this? How do I become the man you raised me to be again? I was quiet for a long moment, considering his question. Could people really change? Could the damage that had been done to our relationship be repaired? Could I ever trust him again to choose me over his image, to defend me when I needed defending? I don't know, I said honestly. Trust, once broken, is like that photograph at your wedding. You can put the pieces back together, but the cracks will always be visible. I'll do anything, he said desperately. Anything to prove to you that I've changed, that I remember who I'm supposed to be. I don't want proof, I said. Proof is for outsiders. I want genuine change. I want the son who loved me unconditionally, not because of what I could do for him, but because I was his mother. I helped him up from the floor and guided him to sit beside me on the couch. Daniel, I said, I will always love you. You're my son, my only child, and nothing can change that. But love and trust are different things. Respect and forgiveness are different things. He nodded, understanding the distinction. I can forgive you for being weak at your wedding, I continued. I can forgive you for choosing your image over my dignity. But I can't forget it. And I can't pretend it didn't reveal something about who you've become. What can I do? He asked. There has to be something I can do. I thought about that for a moment. What did I want from him? What would it take to rebuild what had been broken? Show me, I said finally. Don't tell me you've changed. Show me. Make choices that prove you remember your values. Stand up for what's right even when it costs you something. Be the man I raised you to be, not just with me, but with everyone. He nodded eagerly. I will. I promise I will. And Daniel, I added, don't come back here looking for my approval or my forgiveness until you've figured out who you really are. Until you've decided what kind of man you want to be and committed to being that man regardless of what anyone else thinks. He looked confused. You don't want to see me? I want to see the son I raised, I said. The man with integrity and character and loyalty. When that man is ready to show up consistently, not just when he's in trouble or needs something, then we can rebuild our relationship. It was a hard thing to say, but it was necessary. I couldn't go back to the way things had been, with him taking my love for granted and only remembering my worth when it was convenient for him. How long? He asked. How long should I stay away? However long it takes, I said. This isn't about punishment, Daniel. This is about you figuring out who you really are and what you really value. Until you do that work, until you've proven to yourself that you can be trusted to do the right thing, we can't have a real relationship. He stood up slowly, looking around the room one more time like he was memorizing it. I love you, Mom, he said at the door. More than I've ever been able to express. More than I've shown you lately. You're the best person I know, and I'm going to spend however long it takes becoming someone worthy of being your son again. I watched him drive away, and for the first time since his wedding, I felt something other than pain and anger. I felt hope. Not certainty, but hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the son I had raised was still in there somewhere, buried under years of misplaced priorities and social climbing. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence from Daniel, though I heard about him through mutual acquaintances and business contacts. He was working to rebuild his life, focusing on his career, volunteering with a literacy program for disadvantaged children. He had moved out of the luxury apartment he'd shared with Melissa and into a modest place closer to his office. Most importantly, I heard that he had stood up to some influential clients who had made disparaging comments about their service workers. He had apparently told them that how they treated people said more about their character than their bank accounts, and that his company didn't need clients who couldn't show basic human decency. It cost him a significant contract, but he didn't back down. Then, on a Thursday evening in March, exactly 8 months after his wedding, he showed up at my door again. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't crying or desperate or looking for immediate forgiveness. This time, he looked peaceful, centered, like he had found his way back to himself. Hi, Mom, he said simply. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner together. Nothing fancy. Maybe just order pizza and talk. I looked at him carefully, searching his face for signs of the desperate man who had knelt on my living room floor 8 months ago. That man was gone, replaced by someone who looked more like the son I had raised. I'd like that, I said, opening the door wider. Come in. We ordered pizza like we used to when he was in college and broke, and we talked. Really talked. Not about the wedding or the hurt or the mistakes. We talked about his work, about my business, about books we'd read and movies we'd seen. We talked like mother and son who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. And slowly, carefully, over many months of pizza dinners and Sunday phone calls and birthday celebrations, we rebuilt what had been broken. Not the same as before. You can't go back after something like that, but something new. Something stronger, maybe, because it was built on truth instead of assumption. He never remarried. He said he wasn't ready to trust his judgment about people, especially people who might be attracted to his success rather than his character. He focused on his work, his volunteer activities, and rebuilding his relationship with his mother. As for me, I learned something important during those months of separation and slow reconciliation. I learned that love isn't enough. Love without respect is just sentiment. Love without loyalty is just emotion. Real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, requires choice. Every day, in big moments and small ones, we choose who matters to us and how we'll treat them. Daniel chose wrong at his wedding, but he also chose to make it right. And in the end, maybe that's what counts. Not that we never fall down, but that we get back up. Not that we never fail the people we love, but that we learn from our failures and commit to doing better. That wedding reception was the worst night of my life. But it was also the night I learned who my son really was, and more importantly, who he could choose to become. The humiliation nearly broke us both. But sometimes, things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger than before. I'm Evelyn Rose Rowe. I'm a mother who raised her son to be better than he was that night. And I'm a woman who learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the quiet dignity of knowing your own worth, regardless of whether anyone else recognizes it. The necklace he gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12? I wear it now. Every day. Not because I've forgotten the pain, but because I've chosen to remember the love. The cracked photograph from his wedding? I had it professionally restored and reframed. It sits on my mantle next to dozens of other photos of us throughout the years, the whole story of a mother and son who lost their way and found each other again. Because that's what real families do. We hurt each other sometimes. We fail each other. We disappoint and wound and break each other's hearts. But if the love is real, if the foundation is strong, we also forgive. We rebuild. We choose each other again and again, even after we've seen each other at our worst. My son's wedding was the night I almost lost him forever. But it was also the beginning of getting him back, not as the child who took my love for granted, but as the man who learned to value it. And that, perhaps, was worth all the pain.